I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed77 Radio,
powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports.
Hold on to your hats, boys and girls, and welcome to an all-new edition of Motorsports Madness right here on Speed77 Radio, powered by Race Chaser Online. And tonight, we are live from Race Chaser headquarters, officially for the first time, and definitely glad to be on the air as we've got a whole lot of stuff to talk about here tonight. And sitting across the round table from my co-host and partner in crime, Tom Baker. Tom, I'll tell you, we've got a lot to talk about. We've got our whole cast of characters back together, and boy, if it wasn't one thing, it was another this weekend. We have a lot of racing to talk about. We saw a lot of racing this weekend, so we'll do what we do best, get started talking.
To me, let's go.
Let's go indeed, and want to welcome the other two members of our esteemed cast of characters, our two guest co-hosts tonight to the round table. First, I want to start with our resident dirt expert out of New York, Steve Ovens. Steve, I know you're definitely all on the NASCAR cart with us, but got a lot to talk about. I know a lot of racing, some racing that you were going to see this weekend that got rained out, but you know, we're all here on a Monday night, and it's quite the party.
Back together again, and it feels so good. Yeah, we're coming to you from Buffalo, New York tonight. Gonna talk some dirt. Gonna chime in a little with you guys, talking some NASCAR, and it's gonna be a good night.
And making his grand return to the round table tonight, welcome back to Kyle Souza rejoining the madness for the first time in a couple of weeks. And Kyle, first off, glad to have you back here at the table with us. Second off, I know you were paying attention to everything from New England this weekend. In fact, you were boots on the ground at Loudon for a lot of the action over this weekend. I know you saw a lot. There was a lot that transpired, and boy, everything that seems to be getting talked about today out of Loudon is not what we'd expect, the weekend sweep and Bad Brad, but instead it's the young and the restless, or the oldless, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, opinions circulating. First, going to be back to the madness with all of you. It's been a tough time off, but I'm back, and the weekend at Loudon was absolutely phenomenal. The Saturday races were, in my opinion, better than the Sunday races. We had a great Wheel and Modified Tour event with over 70 lead changes on Saturday afternoon. The Cup race yesterday dragged at some points, but there was also some fantastic racing and domination by Bad Brad. Had a lot of New England racing go on this weekend, and this weekend coming, we've got the biggest grand spectacle of them all. The Oxford 250 returns for its 41st annual action. We'll dive into that a little bit later on with some news and notes. But NASCAR took center stage yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, it did. And Tom, I want to start with you because before we talk about the domination of Bad Brad over the weekend, there was also some business that happened between his teammate and the guy that everybody loves to see on roller skates in the garage area, but Sunday everybody was kind of asking, Morgan, what exactly were you doing when you and Joey Logano got together? A bizarre set of circumstances. We've seen the replay a bunch of times. We've seen both sides of the story play out over the last 24 hours or so, but it seems like all anybody wants to talk about today is Morgan Shepherd versus Joey Logano, and it's not even like we can promote a cage match. Poor Joey would stomp Morgan.
Well, I'm not too sure about that. I think you might be underestimating the old guy just a little bit. Look, I'm going to be the last person to beat up on Morgan Shepherd. I mean, the guy has just given so much of his life to NASCAR, and all the man wants to do is just keep living his dream and keep racing. But, at some point, I blame NASCAR more for what happened yesterday than I do Morgan Shepherd, because Morgan was allowed to stay on the track running 30 miles an hour off the pace. So NASCAR put Morgan in the situation to be able to, to have that incident with Joey Logano. So I blame NASCAR for not pulling him off more than I do Morgan Shepherd. I do think, though, that it's probably time. I mean, it was a mile track. We're not talking about, a Daytona or an Indianapolis or whatever here. We're talking about a mile track. The speeds are not such that Morgan should not have been able to be closer than 30 miles an hour. I think if you've got to be 30 miles an hour off the pace, to me, and I say this in the gentlest, kindest, almost most apologetic way I can, because I don't want to, come off as being, nasty to Morgan Shepherd, but it might just be time to rethink your situation a little bit and say, maybe I need to just go to the trucks, go to ARCA, go to K&N, just somewhere at a level where I can handle the speed and at least not be in the way so much, because that he was just a rolling chicane for most of the day from the way it sounded. And, that incident was all his fault. And, I feel bad for Morgan, but in reality, I think people ought to be looking at NASCAR and saying, you know what, like Jeff Gordon did today, it's time to increase the minimum speed a little bit so that we don't have that situation
Well,
again.
Tom, chiming in here, going with what Gordon said this afternoon, I'll read you a quote. Jeff said, and I quoted, said, I do not know if the minimum speed really contributed to what happened with Morgan and Joey. The side part about it is the minimum speed yesterday afternoon in Atlanta was a speed of 115.88 miles an hour, which was roughly 16 miles an hour, 30 mile an hour pace that Brad Keselowski was showing at certain points of the event. It was into speculation what happened, and Jeff came out and said it this afternoon, way back in 2004 at Darlington. I don't know if you fans remember this, but Gordon and Tony Stewart got together after Andy Hillenburg was a slow lap and keep pace at the track, too tough to tame. It opens up a conversation, not only if is there an age limit we need to put in place? Is there a certain age that you can't go out there on the track? Or does the minimum speed need to be increased to a point where if you're 10 miles an hour off the pace, you need to pull the car in the pits? Or does that advance people to maybe not even bring their cars to the track?
Let me just clarify with you. So you said that the minimum speed that NASCAR had set was 16 miles an hour off the pace the leaders were running?
That's correct. Jeff Gordon saying this afternoon, and complicated by News.com's Bob Pockris, that the speed of Brad Keselowski for much of the event was 130 miles an hour, and the minimum speed of the event was 115.88. Morgan did meet all day with the lowest speed of his at 116.02 as an average around Loudon, so he was a tick over the average speed, but it's 16 mile an hour difference, and not only at a track like Loudon is that a lot. They're only taking 29 seconds around, and with the way you barrel off into turn one, as I saw a lot yesterday, Keselowski won, driving it deep down into turn number one, and when he goes to get back to the throttle, especially with lap cars in front of him, things get very, very edgy off turn number two.
Okay, so the radio crew that we were listening, let's assume he was barely within the minimum speed, then that would tell me that probably at that point, either the minimum speed needs to be increased, or it might be an issue with Morgan specifically, and maybe it's just time to, again, to do something different there. But I hate it for Joey, because he was obviously having a great race running in second, and they were talking about every time somebody come up to pass Morgan, he was in the way, and I don't know. That's just a tough situation, and you hate to you just hate to put a driver in a bad light like that who doesn't deserve to be, because Morgan surely didn't try to wreck him, Jacob. But, it's just an unfortunate incident, and I hate seeing Morgan get all the negative criticism that he's getting, but it kind of is what it is,
Yeah, that's about what I'm seeing with it, too. And, again, I hate it. I love Morgan to death. I've met him on a couple of occasions, and you won't find a nice person in the NASCAR garage area.
Exactly.
But it opens up a lot of cans of worms. But, okay, Kyle, so let's move from that subject over to the other subject that everybody's been talking about the last 48 hours, and that is the dominance of one Brad Keselowski. Keselowski, of course, leading almost 60% of the laps over the course of the weekend. Every time they pitted for tires, he would drive his way back to the front of the field within 30 laps in Sunday's Cup race. He annihilated the field in Saturday's nationwide race. Brad was hooked up over the weekend at the Magic Mile. He made his own magic, and boy, this might be one of the most impressive weekend sweeps that I've seen from the 2012 Cup champion, probably in his entire career to date.
Saturday, Jacob, coming to me is less of a surprise than yesterday did. Brad Romy gets behind the wheel of that number 22 and does dominate. He and Kyle Busch usually go at it. And the longer the run went, Saturday, Kyle's car fell. But yesterday, sitting in the grandstand, and I haven't watched the race back on TV, so I'm not sure how much you can actually tell. But the difference yesterday with Keselowski was his drive in and through the center of the corner. That number 2 was 10 times better than everybody behind. I remember a point late in the race. He got by Quint Boyer, started to save gas, and was still beating Boyer by a tenth or to a lap. It's incredible. The Reds number 2 was that fast yesterday. He and Paul Wolf and the gang did a great job. They were just incredible. They were the only car that could move through track position and move through cars like he could. Lap cars weaving in and out. We saw it early with Kyle Busch. He could do whatever he wanted with his car, but the more rubber that got laid down and the more that groove stuck together, Keselowski's car was just a rocket ship.
It really was, and I want to turn to you now, Steve, because we've seen Brad since 2012. Last year was very much an off year, but we started to wonder after he got the win in Las Vegas and kind of fell off just a little bit. We wondered if Brad was going to rekindle that spark, and now, for the first time since the end of the 2012 season, in my opinion, and you're welcome to agree or disagree, but I think Brad has finally recaptured the form that won him the championship 2 years ago.
No, I completely agree, and although I'm sure that they're not concerned about it at this point, I think it's probably going to start causing a little bit of concern as we get closer to the chase for the Hendrick organization, because and Joey are proving that week in and week out, they are two of the cars to beat on a weekly basis, and that is going to, I think, separate them from anybody else that's qualified themselves into the chase. There may be some cars that have one win, or maybe have been lucky enough to get 2 wins that may not be as competitive over a 10-race stretch as the Penske cars will be.
Well, it's certainly looking an awful lot like a year where Brad Keselowski won the championship back in 2012. This really, it's starting to be that same scenario. Now, the difference is that this year he's got Joey Logano, who is at many tracks just as fast or close to being as fast or faster in some cases, and he is. Both of those teams are capable of winning on a regular basis, and I think you're right. That's a good observation. I think the Hendrick organization and the Penske organization are the two going into the title chase that you really need to be concerned with. And among that organization, you've got 3 Hendrick cars that could legitimately be title contenders. Casey Kane, I don't think, has proven that this year, though if he gets in, certainly is capable of a hot streak. But I think the other 3 Hendrick cars and both Penske cars are very capable of winning the championship. That's a good point. This kind of shakes things up a little bit, going into some tracks that are very, very good to Brad Keselowski coming up.
This also chimes in one more person that I think we're forgetting to mention. The crew has hurt him a lot. They've had a lot of setbacks, but Kevin Harvick has been the other car that's had an extremely fast car. Every week they show up. Yesterday, that number 4 was not as strong as it it has been. I learned in the morning, walking around, that Brad Keselowski and the 2 team had brought a new chassis to the track. So had Kevin Harvick. Kevin had brought that chassis to Richmond earlier in the year, and now they brought it here to Loudon. Childress did some things with it. They were testing for the chase rather than trying to win the race. Unfortunately for him, it didn't work out, but he ran out of gas there in that last restart. But they put themselves in position, and I solely think that if that restart would have went with Keselowski and Harvick side by side, you may have seen some beating and banging down there in turn 1. They're both going to win, and that other win is also important for the seeding, because remember, we do have that elimination race in 2014.
Yeah, we do, and with that, it's going to close the NASCAR chapter, at least for the moment, guys, and I'll tell you, spirited discussion, and I like that, but we're going to take our first caution flag of the night. Got some business to take care of, but when we come back, we'll continue the Motorsports Roundup right here on Speed 77 Radio, powered by Race Chaser Online. You are listening to Motorsports Madness, and we'll be right back.
For 17 years, Stock Car Steel has been a leading materials supplier to the racing industry. We're proud they're a motorsports content partner here at Race Chaser Online. The biggest names in NASCAR trust Stock Car Steel for raw materials such as carbon steel, chrome moly, DOM, aluminum, plastics, and much more. You can't build a race car without the basic materials, and Stock Car Steel is the place to get them. Don't forget to also visit Stock Car Steel's sister company, SRI Supplies, for racing and industry. SRI is the place to go for all your shop supply needs. Nuts, bolts, rivets, tapes, adhesives, cutting tools, chemicals, body shop supplies, paint shop supplies, lubricants, and more. A well-stocked race shop is a winning race shop, and the path to winning begins with 3 letters, SRI. For more information, visit stockcarsteel.com or SRI-supplies.com. Check them both out on Facebook or call them toll-free at 1-888-752-7272, 1-888-752-7272.
The odds of a young girl being discovered by an industry insider while singing to herself pumping gas? 1 in 300 million. The odds of the daughter of a clergyman from Severn, Maryland spending 11 weeks at number 1 on the U.S. singles charts? 1 in 19 million. The odds of going on to win 6 Grammy Awards? 1 in 1.4 million. The odds of selling over 40 million records? 1 in 800,000. The odds of this musician and performer having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 110. I'm Toni Braxton, and I encourage you to learn the signs of autism at autismspeaks.org. Early diagnosis can make a lifetime of difference. Autism Speaks. It's time to listen. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed 77 Radio,
Powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports.
Welcome back to Motorsports Madness here on Speed 77 Radio, powered by Race Chaser Online. Live from Race Chaser headquarters tonight, Jacob Seelman, Tom Baker, Kyle Souza, Steve Ovens, all around the round table as we talk all things motorsports. And boy, there's been a lot to talk about over the weekend, Kyle. You know, one of the things I know you were talking about all weekend long was the modified stuff up at Loudon, the NASCAR Wheel and Modified Tour getting to double down, and boy, oh boy, did we see some exciting racing. The All-Star event on Friday, and then, of course, the Points Sunoco 100 on Saturday. We see Ryan Newman finally return to victory lane in a modified, and boy, Bobby Santos on Saturday at Loudon. I don't think there's anybody that didn't like to see Santos finally break through at the Magic Mile.
Back to Friday for a second, the Wheel and All-American Shootout, All-Star style, Friday afternoon at Loudon, brings some speculation to the table, not from reporters, but from the fans that I've been talking to over the last couple of days. Friday's race, get that race, or a 30-minute time limit. People started timing the race when the green flag went up in the air, and a couple of people had the race timed at 20 when the checkered flag flew. Now, the checkered flag flew 3 laps before scheduled distance at lap 37 because NASCAR claimed that the time limit was over. So it exceeds some controversy that did they actually run 40 in the regular scheduled time, or was it a little bit of a different situation with NASCAR? But nonetheless, Ryan Newman takes home the win in the 7 New York. He's followed by Justin Bonsignor in second. The MPE race for 51. Justin's been strong in that machine this season, and he comes home second on Friday. Saturday, totally different story. More cars on the racetrack, qualifying by time trials instead of the draw that they had Friday, and one of the most phenomenal races I think we've ever seen at the Magic Mile. Lead changes, I would say, just about every corner, back and forth. Of course, they only count the lead changes at the start-finish line, and unofficially, 72 lead changes on Saturday. I guarantee you there were more than that because they were swapping the lead back and forth in each and every corner. Newman was strong at points of that. Mikey Stefanik was strong. So was Doug Kobe. But when the checkered flag goes up in the air, Santos takes the 44 in the victory lane at Loudon, and he was absolutely ecstatic in victory lane when it was all said and done. Newman was strong in the 7, but just could not muster that power at the finish. You're again finishing the front and is doing a lot of work this year with that team in the 51. Wasn't scheduled to run the full season, but it looks like they're going to go that route. He's also driving with the Valenti Modified Racing Series up here in New England, and Justin has been really, really strong. But Jacob Santos, again, that man is just dominant. He's headed to Monadnock this weekend, where that car is also really good.
Yeah, it's really good at Monadnock. So I'll tell you, it's going to be interesting to watch. And Tom, you know, you and I were talking about this the other day. Bobby Santos, he's needed something to go right. They've been waiting to get back to victory lane. He's been gunning to get to victory lane. We expected it was going to be at one of these acts like Stafford that he's so good at over the years. But I'll tell you, a win at Loudon in a modified means so much. And Bobby Santos, he's wanted this for a long time. And what do you know? Saturday, he finally got it.
Well, and to do it the way it happened, too, at the very end of the race. And just the type of race that it was, obviously, with all of the action that was contained within. I just think it's great that Bobby got himself a win. I think I said this a couple weeks ago. That boy belongs in one of NASCAR's Big 3 series, and I just hope that at some point in the near future, somebody recognizes that and gives him a good opportunity in a top-notch piece of equipment, because Bobby can flat-out wheel a race car of any type. I'm glad to see him get the win. He's from New England. I'm sure he had a ton of fans there. I've got to believe it was hugely popular, so that's great to see got the victory up there.
Not only popular for Santos on Saturday, Bobby was also really strong on Friday, and the fans around the New Hampshire Motor Speedway, I don't even know how to describe it. They were like, it was ecstatic. There were more fans that I've seen there for a modified race. As soon as the modified race was over, you saw a lot of them creep to the parking lot and get in their vehicles and leave and not even stay for the nationwide race. One way didn't surprise me, and another way it did. But long story short on Santos, he's been extremely fast all season long. He's trying to set himself up championship run that many thought couldn't happen. Changing a quick note here for a second, Tour driver that ran well Saturday in the Tour was Ryan Preece. This man also took a nationwide car to the Magic Mile on Saturday, and he came home with a top 15 finish, which I think for Ryan Preece was something that he was looking for inside the top 20. And to get a 14th place finish out of Loudon, I think Ryan's got to be extremely, extremely happy.
Well, and you know, we've been talking for weeks and months on our shows about how much bad luck this young man has had this year. This has been one of those seasons, you know, we talk all the time about the magic year where you can't seem to do anything wrong. Ryan Preece could not seem to do anything right this year, and so maybe that's a sign of a change in luck for him. A great run in the Nationwide Series for Ryan, and I'm just, again, there's another who belongs in that series, and I hope him get a little more recognition, maybe get some funding to run a few more races with Tommy. I know they would, I know both Tommy Baldwin and Ryan would like to see that.
Oh, I know that Ryan would like to see that happen, and we'll have a lot more conversation Wednesday night. You know, we've got two guys in Jesse Little and James Bickford. Who would have thunk that this weekend? Just a phenomenal weekend of racing on the NASCAR side in all levels.
Oh, we talked about that on the show, I think, last Thursday, and I said that I thought Jesse was definitely a favorite to win. It's the type of track where Jesse's driving style really makes a difference, and he seems to be comfortable there. But certainly James Bickford was awesome, and I just like seeing that young kid have success. He's such a humble kid, And, he kind of lives, I think, still to a degree of Jeff Gordon, which isn't, for a lot of people, isn't a very bad place to be. But if he keeps doing what he's doing, he's going to be out of that shadow and carving his own path pretty quickly. And so that was a pretty neat deal for him to get that win out west.
Yeah, it really was, and to beat Greg Persley, one of the all-time best in the K&M Pro Series West, to do it, just a really special night for him all the way around at State Line Speedway in Idaho, and I'm sure just the first of many to come. We're looking at tracking down both Jesse and James for our Stock Car Steel SRI Motorsports show on Wednesday, hoping to hear from both of those young drivers after their impressive victories. Tom, another thing that we've been talking about all weekend long, and, it's definitely something that deserves talk, because for son of a gun, it was the first time all season long that we saw the 51 in victory lane, but lo and behold, the boss wasn't driving it. Eric Jones goes to victory lane in Iowa. Not a surprise. We know how good this 18-year-old driver from Michigan is, but look at that. The 51 can win without the boss. About time.
Well, it's about time, but I believe this is also the second time that they got flagged for an offense in tech too. So, I don't want to paint it with, a wholly black brush here, but, I'm glad to see Eric get the win, and he had to drive the truck to the win. And Eric's a young man with a great future in the sport, but it does get the first time is kind of a freak thing. The second time it starts to look like a pattern, and we don't take wins away in NASCAR, so. Basically, it's who cares about driver points at this point? Eric's not running for the championship, and owners points. Well, I guess that's not necessarily the best thing, but it's one of those situations where it almost starts to look like the 51 truck feels like it has little to lose. So I'm hoping NASCAR comes down a little harder this time and makes the point that that's got to stop, because I'd like to think the truck's winning on its correct merits and not because they're just kind of stretching things a little too far over there and not feeling like they are going to necessarily care about the accountability part of it.
And I think it's also interesting that we're talking about ride height because, of course, the ride height rule eliminated this year in the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series, but not in the Napping World Truck Series. Maybe it's time that NASCAR looks at completely making the rules package uniform once again. I don't know that... Eric Phillips said after the race, the first time we might have tried something, but this time absolutely no way were they trying anything crazy, and they were just as surprised as everybody else was when the truck came back too low. So, but of course, there's three sides to every story. One side, NASCAR's side, and the truth. especially at Pono. But with all that, I think that about closes our book, unless I'm forgetting NASCAR going to be in action Canada on Wednesday. Right. They head to the Oval Auto Clearing Motor Speedway, and over the weekend, there was one more race up in Western Canada. Andrew Ranger going to victory lane and sitting on the pole as well. He ties both the poles and wins record this weekend in search of his third straight championship. And, oh, by the way, he's entered for the ARCA race this weekend, too, at Chicago.
And, oh, by the way, he won on an oval track. So the idea that Andrew is a road racer more than he is an oval track racer, you can throw that out now. He's got a victory on an oval. Andrew Ranger's just a talented racer, and I'm glad he's entered at Chicago, and I think if that piece is good enough to run for the win, he will be running for the win.
Absolutely right, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens this weekend because we know that team can win. They won on the road course at New Jersey earlier this season, and they've said they've pulled out all the stops for this weekend in Chicago. They want to get him a victory. We've seen him run on the dirt at DuQuoin. We've seen him run on road courses, ovals. Andrew Ranger, one of the most versatile drivers, I think, right now in NASCAR. And I'll tell you, I think he deserves a shot at the national level. It's just going to be really interesting to see. But I want to see him run well this weekend, be competitive, because that team's been working on it all season long, and they deserve a good run in the stock car on the oval. But with that, another caution flag, and get ready to open the book on Open Wheel Central when we come back, because Joel Sebastianelli joining the round table with us, and after this little bit of business, we're going to talk to him because a lot of action went on over the weekend in the IndyCar Series, and boy, some of it left a lot of distasteful words in a few people's mouth. We'll hear from that right after this break. You are listening to Speed 77 Radio, powered by Race Chaser Online. Stay with us.
Packers,
Vikings,
Red State,
Blue State.
We come from different places.
Uptown,
Downtown.
We come to different conclusions.
half empty,
Half full.
But no matter how different we are, we're all connected, and we can all make a difference. That's why United Way brings people, expertise, and resources together to improve the education, income, and health of our communities, the building blocks for a better life. When we live united, our efforts, magnified by others, add up to real change. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly, so do our communities. But real change won't happen without you.
Live united.
So let's look beyond our differences.
Live united.
One by one, let's make a difference. Let's reach out a hand to one and influence the condition of all.
Live united.
Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
My very first movie, it was called British Terabithia, and that was a film that a lot of kids loved.
From IamSecond.com.
It felt very cool in my heart to know that I did something nice.
Actress Bailey Madison.
I don't want it to be about me, I want it to be about God. Even though you have an earth father, he is your father, that you can say to him, God, I'm not feeling too well today. Or if it's just, little things like, I feel homesick, or I need you, Lord, I need to feel happiness in my heart. The most important thing is you have to have hope, you have to have faith. God is with you, and God is with you every step of the way. If you give yourself to God and you say, I'm ready to commit myself to you, you will know that God is watching you. He looks down and he goes, I'm very, very happy with what you just did. My name is Bailey Madison, and I am second.
For every turn, a twist. For every start, an untimely finish. For every win, someone who loses it. For every number, a nation. For every celebration, a brawl. For every split second, years of work. For every heaven, a hell. For every good old boy, a good old girl. For every curse, a prayer. For every ounce of order, a jug of chaos. For every twist, there's a turn.
I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed 77 Radio,
Powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports.
Welcome back to Motorsports Madness here on Speed 77 Radio and RaceChaserOnline.com. Jacob Seelman, Kyle Souza, Tom Baker, Steve Ovens, and roving open wheel correspondent Joel Sebastianelli, all at the round table tonight. And Joel, boy, where do we even start with this weekend's IndyCar Series action from Iowa? 300 laps is always fun to talk about. Chip Ganassi Racing being back on the rise is always fun to talk about. And when you get somebody fired up, like, I don't know, Juan Pablo Montoya, and he starts throwing words like douchebag around on camera after an incident, boy, certainly leaves us media people with plenty to bite into in the proverbial apple.
Between that and almost threatening to throw his helmet at Ed Carpenter, it's almost as though one popped that he wasn't in NASCAR, and that sort of thing doesn't happen in IndyCar. But let's start at the finish, find a place to start. Ryan Hunter-Reay picking up a surprise victory. He led 2 laps The restart on lap 192 took on new tires and picked up 9 positions in the final 8 laps of the race to pick up the victory. A well-deserved victory at Iowa. Another one for Andretti Autosport. And for Ryan Hunter-Reay, he is back in contention for the title, going to a track in Toronto. It's in one weekend that he's very, very strong at. And when you look at Mid-Ohio and Milwaukee and the rest of the tracks coming up at the end of the year, it's possible that even with him in third, you could argue that he's the favorite to win this championship with just over a month to go in this.
Wow. There's a win that I didn't expect Joel go out on right now. I figured we wait a couple more weeks before Joel started making championship predictions, but all right, there you go. Joel says Ryan Hunter-Reay might be in the catbird seat. But Joel, let me tell you, the other thing I want to talk about here is not just Juan Pablo and his colorful English language weekend, but you were talking that Juan Pablo and AJ Foyt need more TV time, and boy, after the weekend that AJ Foyt had, I don't know that we want him on TV, but it was certainly interesting when he was on this weekend. I mean, I hate the way the day ended for Takuma Sato, but boy, like I said, it just gives us plenty of stuff to talk about.
Unfortunately, we'd have to get the premium networks behind it, like HBO and Showtime, if we really wanted to give these guys more time, but I'm thinking just a hidden camera format. Let's just piss these guys off something fierce, both Juan Pablo and AJ. Just stick a camera somewhere in the room, and let's just see what happens. We could have other stars of IndyCar in on the hijinks, and it would be great, and certainly better than what happened to Takuma Sato this weekend, because that was very unfortunate. Takuma Sato's a guy who, with his aggressive as he is, he makes a lot of his problems himself, but he tends to get caught up in a lot of incidents as well. And you want to talk about Indy rivals, it's starting to become a bit of a rivalry between Mikhail Aleshin, rookie, and Takuma Sato. They've come together twice now in incidents that, if you had to chalk it up to somebody's fault, it's Mikhail Aleshin. And Aleshin helped squeeze towards Takuma Sato and helped put Sato into the wall. I say helped because I don't believe it was all Aleshin's fault, and I think that was just a racing incident, even with the Russian one lap down. But in this race, Aleshin and that 7 team put 3 cranks of front wing into the front of the car as soon as the restart green flag waved. The second he hit the throttle, that car just whipped right around, went all the way up the track in turn 4, and right into Takuma Sato. So a very unfortunate break for them, and you can't blame AJ for being upset at some of the things that happens to this 14 team, but it certainly made things plenty unpredictable and a bit enjoyable for the fans too.
You know, Joel, AJ needs to be careful. Supertex isn't quite Supertex anymore. He's more like old and fragile Tex now. He needs to be careful messing with the Russian there. Next thing you know, Ivan Drago will be charging toward his garage area going, I must break him. I mean, that's, you know, he's really threading on dangerous territory here, messing with Mikhail Aleshin, even if it's true.
Look, if Drago takes on Takuma Sato, I'll take Drago today, but against AJ Foyt, there's something about AJ Foyt. I don't think you can count him out of any fight.
About the only thing he can do with Drago now is beat him up with his cane. I mean, he's, you know, AJ's not as spry as he used to be, and he's a little heavier too. I mean, back in the day, he would have taken that a bunch of those Craftsman tools and just wore his butt out. But I don't know about now. I think I got some money on the Mad Russian there, but that was a bit crazy. And honestly, the whole Juan Pablo deal for me was just a little bit of sour grapes, to be quite honest, but it's fun stuff, and I love that Juan is you know, IndyCar needs that sort of a thing. And by the way, I agree with you 100% on Ryan Hunter-Reay. I'm going to go right there with you and say that I think that this could be developing into Ryan Hunter-Reay's championship to lose.
It's always these tracks in the summer that he's so strong on, and even though the schedule has been rearranged a little bit, it might work even more in his favor momentum-wise when you put Milwaukee at the very end. Don't forget, it was actually 10 years ago, this June, that he led every single lap of the race in Champ Car at Milwaukee to pick up the victory there, and he's won there in the IndyCar Series as well. He's always been great at Milwaukee, and you figure every time that the IndyCar Series goes there, he's one of the guys you got to put your money on. Same with Toronto, where he's won as well. So for Ryan Hunter-Reay, this is exactly the point of the year where he tends to pick up steam, and I think we're seeing it happen again because he's just so good at these tracks. As for the Juan Pablo Montoya situation, just to there, I disagree with you, Tom. I think that as much as I love good, hard racing, and as much as Juan Pablo may have been slightly in the wrong in the heat of competition to say the things that he said, handled the situation in the manner that I think Ed Carpenter blocked him, broke his suspension, and put him into the wall. We will power flack for blocking guys, and sometimes I think we make blocking a little bit of a bigger deal than it actually is, but Juan Pablo put his car cleanly on the inside, and Ed Carpenter clearly turned his car to the left, turned further than he had room for, smacked right into the wheel of Montoya, and Montoya had nowhere to go. Hit Carpenter. Carpenter was lucky enough to then still pick up a top 5, but he should have been sent to the end of the field or given a drive-through for blocking, because to me that was textbook. But that's not something that I'm going to gripe about. I think it was an outstanding race, and if they're going to let him get away with that, that's fine, just as long as that's consistent down the road. I don't really object to it. I just think that given what we've seen, maybe Ed Carpenter got away with one there.
Oh, I think he misunderstood when I talked about sour grapes. I don't disagree with any of your analysis of the crash. There's no question it was Ed Carpenter's fault all the way, and Ed even admitted as such. When Juan whines about somebody being over-aggressive or making a bad move, I just find it's a little bit like the pot calling the kettle black, because for how many years in NASCAR, Juan was the master at it and would never admit that it was. So I just find it funny that, some drivers like that, it's always one way, but certainly it was definitely Juan, because here Juan won the week before. There's a driver right there that might be tough to beat, Jacob, for the rest of the season. He's kind of got his swagger going now, and when he gets that up, that's when he gets on a high horse, it's tough to get him off. He's going to be contending every week from here on out, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the Pocono victory was just the breakthrough. We talk about when the dam bursts, that from there it's all about momentum and how funny a thing it really is. And I think that's exactly what Juan Pablo's going to have now. I think it's a shame. He had worked his way from the back of the field up to basically the top 5 before the incident with Carpenter. And I think he very well could have contended for the victory before it was said and done. As it was, we were talking about Ryan Hunter-Reay going from 10th on a miracle drive to the win. Tony, that's the one name we've not mentioned, because TK led almost 250 laps in this race, Joel, and we thought that Target Chip Ganassi was going to grab their first win of the season. Unfortunately, TK just didn't have the tires at the end that Hunter-Reay did, and I know he was very disheartened after that race because he felt like it was his in the palm of his hand pretty much, and Ryan just came and stole it from him.
In hindsight, taking on new tires was the right move, but when you're the leader, you've led so many laps, and you've got to restart with 8 laps to go right in the post-race press conference. To pit from first to get new tires would have been crazy. We can speculate what it would have been all you want, but that's not a decision that you should be making when you're the leader at that time. And, most of the guys, at least that are closest to you, if none of them are going to stop, you can't just go in and hope that new tires are going to help you gain back that position that you relinquished. I don't think anybody saw that coming for Ryan Hunter-Reay and these guys that climbed up the field after taking those new tires. So for Tony, you just get the feeling that you're robbed. It's one of your best racetracks. He always finishes so strong at Iowa. And you really shouldn't be that disappointed, especially with the type of season he's had, finishing in 3rd place for just the 2nd time this season. But when you really should have had a win, and you were penciled in for a win from the second you took the lead from your teammate at the beginning of this race after starting on the front row, it's just a really, really disappointing end for Tony Kanaan, a guy who felt like he should have deserved so much more because of the way he raced at Iowa, but only have to lead the last lap of the race. In Ryan Hunter-Reay's case, he led the last 2, and what a gamble it was. What a strategy. The best move of the year in IndyCar, I think, and it's responsible solely for his win, those new tires.
3rd win of the year for Hunter-Reay. So now IndyCar goes to a doubleheader this weekend in Toronto, where we've seen several guys in the past be good. Of course, Hunter-Reay likes Toronto. We've seen both Elio Castroneves and Will Power be good there over the years, but a doubleheader, and these doubleheaders we've seen so far in 2014, Joel, we've seen where anything can and sometimes will happen. I mean, you have a guy like Carlos Huertas pick up a win at Houston, I mean, anything can happen, and I don't think you can peg a favorite going into Canada this weekend because there's too many variables, especially at this Toronto racetrack, to where you can look at the stats and pick a guy who's been consistent over the years, but a winner, no way.
Well, if you're going to go ahead and go winner, IndyCar tends to be predictably unpredictable, as I like to say. But Ryan Hunter-Reay's always been good at Toronto. It's a track that he shines at. Last year he actually had a very disappointing week, but in 2012 he won the race at Toronto, finished third in 2011. He's always been really good at Toronto, and if I had to put my money down on one guy who's going to pick up a victory, I would say Ryan Hunter-Reay. It wouldn't surprise me at all, though that's also not much of a gamble to say that either now, is it?
No, it's really not, and I think that's just what makes IndyCar this year so interesting. And, you know, Tom and I were talking about it the other day real quickly, Joel, and I want to hit on Formula One, too, because some stuff coming up on that side. But just real quickly, you know, we've been talking about all year about television and IndyCar and NASCAR and all the things circling around that, but IndyCar television ratings have been up by almost 40% across the board, but the telecasts here of late more than double the number of from where they've been in 2013, and all this while NASCAR ratings are slowly declining. I know for you, Joel, that's almost like a wine and cheese dinner celebration kind of news, because anything that puts a nail in NASCAR and makes open wheel a little bit happier makes you happy.
Well, yes, but as I'm sure any driver will tell you, if you're not on top, there's room for improvement, and it's tough to celebrate anything other than a victory. You want IndyCar to just keep moving up and up and up. The fact is, even with television ratings improving as they are, those numbers are still not very high when you think about the amount of people that will tune in for something like a NASCAR race. Compared to some Formula One telecasts in different countries, this is just peasants' numbers for IndyCar. But that sounds overwhelmingly negative, and the tone I want to have here is positive. They're getting better and better for a reason. You know, sometimes I'll knock IndyCar for being a spec series. I'd like to see a little bit more diversity like you see in Formula One. At least in IndyCar, this is some of the best wheel-to-wheel racing anywhere in the world, if not the best. And I think in the motorsports community, sometimes word travels slowly, but word still travels. And the more people talk about this, the more people get their friends to watch it and get involved. I've even had a few of my friends start watching IndyCar because they've never really been into NASCAR, but there's something about IndyCar to them that just hit on with them recently. There's something that's just awesome about the way this series is right now. You've got marketable young stars, some of whom haven't even won yet. You know, one guy we haven't talked about who got overshadowed, but the tire strategy worked well for him too, was Joseph Newgarden, finishing second at Iowa over the weekend. Can you imagine when this guy starts winning races, when he becomes the face of IndyCar, if he does at some point? I mean, it would be great. At least in the 80s and the 70s and even the 90s, NASCAR guys seem to have so much more character. And I don't mean that in the way that we sometimes use character to describe honor. I don't mean it as a discredit at all. But I mean, these guys jumped off the page. They weren't just flat characters. They were these well-rounded 3D guys with plenty of personality. And I think to a certain extent, some of the popular NASCAR drivers have gotten away from that a little bit. And it's happened in Formula One as well. I think in IndyCar has done a good job that needs to be done even better of fleshing these guys out, bringing them out, because they've got so many marketable, awesome guys away from the track that you can't help but root for them on the track, too. Even in a race where it's a little bit dull, you got to have these guys to root for, and IndyCar is starting to do a very good job of that.
Well, I agree with everything you're saying, Joel, and the sports car numbers are up as well. So even the sports car series, the Tudor series is up, and that's awesome to see. But I think the IndyCar deal, I don't think you need to look a whole lot farther than the fact that now you're starting to see a few of these drivers who, like Joseph Newgarden, were actually born and bred in the USA, and you've got guys in the Indy Lights division, and you've got Sage Karam coming up as well, who I still think obviously eventually is going to be an IndyCar racer for Ganassi. You've got these drivers that are just they're American born and bred, and I think Americans relate to that. I also think that the fact that Kurt Busch just did what he did with running the double, I think that drew a lot of attention to Indy, and by tag along, IndyCar, and I think people looked at that and went, hey, this is actually pretty cool. So, again, I think IndyCar has the chance here if they can capitalize on this. I think IndyCar has the chance to really have a popularity surge over the next 2 to 3 years. But you're right, Joel. They have to get these drivers out into the mainstream and put them on TV and commercials and whatever, and do, I think, a similar campaign to what NASCAR's doing with the Nationwide Series with the young guns that run in that deal.
Oh, those are great commercials, and they do a very good job of promoting the Nationwide guys. And is somebody who isn't a huge Oval fan and not a big fan of NASCAR, but certainly appreciates it. I found that, believe it or not, I don't know how much of it is really due to those commercials and that marketing campaign or not, but I found that I've taken more of an interest in young guys like Carson and Chase Elliott than I have in what's been going on Sunday afternoons in the actual Cup Series. So I don't know if I'm alone in that, and I can't speak for the nationwide numbers, although I'm sure that I could look them up. I certainly wasn't prepared to talk about the nationwide. Make a really good thing that I can relate to with Nationwide. And for IndyCar, I think it's a very similar thing, a similar strategy that they should follow. You're exactly right, Tom. That feels weird coming off my lips. You're exactly right.
Doing it.
It feels really weird hearing you two talk like this. Wow, I'm a little bit floored right.
It's an off night in the show.
No kidding. I'll tell you, though, Joel, real quickly here. Formula One, of course, always want to put a bit of that in, getting ready. The suspension discussion, the Frick discussion has been in the news here of late, and just want to get your thoughts on it really quickly, because there seems to be a lot of consensus that it's not going to go away this year. There's a lot of consensus that that's Mercedes' silver bullet, so to speak, and there's a lot of interesting discussion about whether taking it away is actually going to derail the Silver Arrows or not, and I'm curious your thoughts on it getting ready to go into another race weekend.
I'll make this as quick as I can, because I think I should explain what this FRIC, stands for Front and Rear Interconnected. It's a system that links the front and rear suspension using hydraulics with the aim of increasing and improving ride stability and helping to maintain a balance as the car goes through different types of corners. It gives the driver a little bit of confidence, it makes the car easy to drive, and it certainly helps the tires work better. If we're going to see a real change, I think it may be that the tires will go out a little bit earlier, and at some Grand Prix you may have to make one extra stop if Frick is banned, but other than that, it's going to require a little bit of different engineering from most Formula One teams. Just like the blown diffusers, I would think that a blown diffuser would actually be much more of a loss than Frick would be. There are teams that aren't going to want it to go away, and Mercedes is certainly one of them. But from everything I've seen, and just my 2 cents on it, given what I've heard from different engineers and interviews, there may be a lap difference of